Thanks for joining our webinar today. My name is Courtney Bird-Williams. I'm an assistant professor here at the Michael and Susan Dell Center for Healthy Living at the University of Texas School of Public Health, Austin Regional Campus. The Michael and Susan Dell Center for Healthy Living is an international leader in conducting research and providing programs that promote healthy living for children, their families, and communities. Our mission is to advance health and healthy living for children and families through innovative research, cutting-edge, community-based programs, and dissemination of evidence-based practices. Today, I am delighted to introduce Julie Stagg, the State Breastfeeding Coordinator at Department of State Health Services. She will be describing the Texas Mother-Friendly Worksite program to you today and how to support worksite lactation. Julie and her team at DSHS developed the Texas Mother-Friendly Worksite program to encourage and recognize employers across the state who have policies and practices in place to support worksite lactation, and to date over 2,000 worksites have been designated. Recently, the Michael and Susan Dell Center for Healthy Living at the School of Public Health has joined the Texas Mother-Friendly Worksite team, and we are excited to be providing technical assistance and support to employers who would like to become designated. And at this point, I'll turn it over to Julie. Thank you.
Thank you, Courtney. As Courtney said, I'm Julie Stagg, Women's and Perinatal Health Nurse Consultant and State Breastfeeding Coordinator at the Texas Department of State Health Services. And today we're going to talk about the components of a Texas Mother-Friendly Worksite policy that would qualify for a standard level designation. We'll provide some sample policy language, talk about some basics of policy development and program development for implementing a worksite lactation support program, and touch on the criteria for silver and gold level designation or recognition under the Texas Mother-Friendly Worksite program. And as Brooke said, we will have time for questions that are not answered through the presentation. So, to provide an overview, the Texas Mother-Friendly Worksite program provides guidance, tools, and support for development of worksite lactation support policies and programs. And those and the program aims to be responsive to the needs of employees and their babies, feasible and sustainable for employers, and beneficial for the health of Texans. Many people have questions about what is included in worksite lactation support. And in a nutshell, worksite lactation support are basic arrangements that allow mothers to comfortably express and store breast milk when separated from their babies throughout the workday. So just to provide some context on why providing worksite lactation support is important, I wanted to touch on the public health case, the physiological basis for the need for lactation breaks, the legal case, and the business case. Breastfeeding is the standard for infant feeding and protects infants and children from infectious and chronic diseases, including sudden infant death syndrome, ear infection, gastrointestinal infection, respiratory infection, lymphoma, leukemia, asthma, diabetes, and many, many other poor health outcomes. Women who breastfeed also have a reduced risk for disease, including breast and ovarian cancers, type 2 diabetes, postpartum depression, and cardiovascular disease, which is still the #1 killer of women. Recent cost analysis estimate that more than $31 billion in direct and indirect healthcare costs could be saved, and 900 or more children's deaths could be prevented annually in the United States if women were able to breastfeed according to medical recommendations. For mothers, breaks for lactation are similar to other work breaks to attend to their physical needs. Any employee, such as drinking water, eating lunch, or going to the restroom. When a breastfeeding mother and child are separated for more than a few hours during the workday, the woman must express milk in order for her body to be able to maintain milk production. If she misses even one needed pumping session, this can lead to discomfort, leaking of breast milk, inflammation, infection, decreased milk production, and eventually, as with frequent missed pumping breaks, breastfeeding cessation is likely to occur. The good news is that providing worksite lactation is good not only for families and for employees who are lactating, but also for businesses. Lactation programs are cost effective, and many studies of worksite lactation support programs have shown a return on investment of $3 for every $1 invested. By supporting lactation at work, employers can reduce turnover, lower recruitment and training costs through increased retention and reduced absenteeism, boost morale and productivity, and reduce healthcare costs. There are many solutions for employers to provide the basics of lactation support. So lactation accommodation is not one size fits all. There's a solution for every employment setting to meet the needs of both the employer and the employee. There are also laws that relate to this area, including under the Federal Fair Labor Standards Act, the 2010 amendment for the reasonable break time for nursing mothers that amended the overtime provision of the Fair Labor Standards Act. And this law is enforced by the U.S. Department of Labor. That requirement is that an employer must provide reasonable break time each time a mother has a need to express breast milk, and also a place that is not a bathroom, that is shielded from view and free from intrusion from the public and from coworkers, to express breast milk throughout the employee's baby's first year. The Equal Employee Opportunity Commission clarified their guidance on the pregnancy discrimination amendment of the Title VII of the Civil Rights Act in July of 2014 to clarify that an employee who is lactating must have the same freedom to address lactation-related needs that she and her coworkers would have to address any other similarly limiting medical condition. So if breaks, for example, are provided for another employee to attend to medical needs, then breaks must also be provided for lactation. Or if leave were provided to go to a doctor's appointment, then leave might be provided also for going to see a lactation consultant, etc. In Texas, effective September 1 of this year, Texas Government Code 619 now provides the right to express breast milk in the workplace for public employees, and requires all public employers to develop a written policy providing for support of expressing breast milk and providing reasonable breaks and a place in which to do this. The bill also prohibits discrimination. And in 1995, in Texas Health and Safety Code 165 created the Mother-Friendly Business designation and provided the authority to the Department of State Health Services to maintain a registry of businesses that proactively support breastfeeding and for their breastfeeding employees. So a mother-friendly business is a business that develops a policy that supports the practice of worksite breastfeeding by addressing the following components: work schedule flexibility, including scheduling of breaks and work patterns to provide time for expression of breast milk, the provision of accessible locations allowing privacy, access nearby to a clean, safe water source and a sink for washing hands and rinsing any needed breast pumping equipment, access to hygienic storage alternatives in the workplace for the mother's breast milk. The emphasis in the mother-friendly designation is on the policy, and how these components are provided, as I said earlier, has a lot of flexibility depending on the needs of the employer and the employee and the setting in which this support is to be provided. So one common question that employers have is, do they need to have a written policy in order to be eligible for the Mother-Friendly Worksite designation if they already have a place to express breast milk and time for employees to express breast milk during the workday? So because this designation is a legislatively created designation, there are minimum criteria that must be met in order for a business to hold themselves out as a mother-friendly worksite. And those are outlined in administrative code and also in the health and safety code. As I mentioned earlier, the policy is really the backbone of this designation, and so in order to become designated as the mother-friendly, then a written policy that addresses the criteria that I discussed before must be submitted to the Department of State Health Services, evaluated for its adherence to the minimum criteria, and then the business can be designated if those criteria are met. This is a snapshot of what the Texas Administrative Code looks like. This code is updated every 4 years or more often if needed, and this outlines the rules that the agency uses to assess whether criteria are met, providing further clarification to the law. In 2011, the rules were changed to match the requirements for space that are used by the U.S. Department of Labor in their interpretation of the Reasonable Break Time for Nursing Mothers Act. So prior to that law passing, there was a lot of emphasis on having a dedicated space with a locking door, but since 2011, that emphasis has changed to really emphasizing the policy and allowing a lot of flexibility for different space solutions. Also in 2011, the criteria for additional recognition for work sites that did more to support their employees were created. So a silver level designation and a gold level designation were implemented at that time. The rules also allow for us to maintain, to ensure maintenance of designation through a redesignation process. We've not implemented that redesignation process yet, but we do intend to do that in the coming year. So minimum standards for designation are that a mother-friendly or a business must maintain a written policy that adheres to the definition of a mother-friendly business. And that definition is that the worksite actively promotes and supports breastfeeding by its employees, and that it maintains the written policy that is regularly communicated to employees. So it's not enough to just have this documented somewhere. It must also be communicated to the employees so that they're aware of it on a regular basis, at least annually. A frequent question that we get is what is a worksite? How do you define a worksite? And the U.S. Department of Labor has a definition that we use. A worksite is an economic unit, generally at a single physical location where business is conducted or where services or industrial operations are performed. So each location constitutes a unique worksite, but there may be more than one business unit or worksite at a single address, such as a building with multiple businesses in it, or a strip mall, etc. While there's one address, that's multiple business units. The second minimum standard for designation is that the policy must provide for work schedule and work pattern flexibility to, at a minimum, accommodate a reasonable break time for an employee to express breast milk for a nursing child or to breastfeed if the employer allows that. Each time such an employee has a need to express the breast milk for 1 year or longer after the child's birth. So, what is meant by flexible scheduling? The U.S. Department of Labor has some very good guidance on what a reasonable break time means, and basically that guidance is that the needs of a nursing mother will vary from woman to woman, and also for that same woman throughout the time that she's breastfeeding. So there are no there's no rigid definition of reasonable break time. It's really based on the needs of that particular employee throughout the time that she's breastfeeding. It is reasonable for an employer to have a conversation where the mother can communicate what she expects her needs will be, as long as there's an opening to be able to reassess that throughout the time that she's breastfeeding her baby. So flexible scheduling includes providing some flexibility in that employee's workday to be able to have the length and frequency of breaks that she needs. For example, combining rest breaks, splitting meal breaks, etc., and or adapting their work schedule, such as allowing them to come in a little early or leave a little late to ensure reasonable time and to make up any unpaid time used for milk expression breaks. So lactation breaks do not need to be paid breaks. If you as an employer provide paid breaks standard to your employees, then the employee should be allowed to use those paid breaks. 15 to 20 minutes is what the U.S. Department of Labor considers to be a paid rest break. And then any time over and above that should be allowed to be made up. And then some silver and gold level solutions might include making arrangements so that if the mother chooses to not interrupt her work during the time that she's expressing breast milk, such as if she has a private office and can do hands-free pumping while she continues to work, then that's not break time. Also having arrangements where the baby is close by, such as baby at work policies or on-site childcare or work-from-home arrangements where the mother might be able to have access to her baby throughout the workday can also be considered to support the mother in being able to attend to her work and also maintain, have the time she needs to maintain lactation. In general, most women will need about 15 to 20 minutes of time pumping every 2 to 3 hours throughout the workday. You also have to account for time that will be required to get to and from the lactation space, and so that's really important to consider when looking at space options. The third minimum standard for designation is that the policy must provide for employees to have a private accessible area other than a bathroom that is shielded from view and free from intrusion from coworkers and the public. Each time such an employee has a need to express breast milk throughout the workday. So the space must be sanitary and functional for the use of an employee to express breast milk. So if you notice, this doesn't specify that it has to be a room or a dedicated room. Flexible space can be arranged, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. At minimum, the space should have a comfortable place to sit and should, I don't think it says this here, but it should be clean. I hope that goes without saying. Should have a flat surface other than a floor on which to place the breast pump. It should have a door that is equipped with a functional lock, or if that's not possible, the room should have a sign advising that the location is in use and not accessible to other employees or the public. And if signage is regularly used in place of a lock, it's also very important to communicate with all employees at that site what that sign means and that they must respect the sign. So the federal law does specify that the space should be free from intrusion. So if a mother has a pump, a sign on her door or on the door of the space, then if that sign's up, then that should prohibit people from knocking and telling the person to hurry up, or from walking in on the room while she's taking her lactation breaks. The space, if possible, should be well lit and ensure privacy by covering any windows with a curtain, blind, or other privacy covering. Where feasible, it should be close to the employee's workstation, so minimizing the amount of break time that she'll need to access the space. And again, I hope it goes without saying, but they should be able to access the space. So if there are locked doors in the way of between the employee and that space, then that employee needs to have access to those, to be able to pass through those barriers. And where possible, access to an electrical outlet should be provided. And there's really, in just about any situation, an opportunity to provide an electrical outlet of some kind, even in a field, if there's, there's battery packs that you can plug into, or there are car adapters for pumps as well. So there's a lot of flexibility for that solution. So many employers have the experience that finding space is difficult, and I do want to emphasize that a permanent dedicated lactation space is not required, and if it's not going to be used, it's not recommended to have a permanent dedicated lactation space. Some offices lend themselves to that if they have often have women of childbearing age working for them, and the room is in use pretty consistently, then that makes sense to have a permanent dedicated space. Otherwise, what is required is the policy will provide for arrangement of space when needed. So that can take on a variety of forms, including a space that's temporarily created for the time that the employee will be using that, or converted into, or a space being converted, and this can be, using cubicle walls, or repurposing a break room or a conference room, or, depending on the setting, if it's where there's really not any physical space, there might be use of partitions, or there's a great example from California, Great Fields, of a pop-up tent, or the foreman's air-conditioned vehicle that can be used. So there's really a lot of different solutions, and we have a resource that can help you find the specific solution that works best for your setting. The fourth standard that must be met is that the policy provides for access to a clean, safe water source and a sink. The sink does not need to be located in the lactation space, but it should be close by and, again, accessible for all program users. A restroom sink is acceptable, although from surveys we've heard both from employees who are not the lactating employee and from lactating employees, they both would prefer to not have breast pumps washed in the restroom sink, but sometimes that's the only space available, and that is acceptable. For places without plumbing, a portable sink and potable water source, a clean water source in a cooler or another type of container may be used in absence of plumbing. And it's important to consider the travel time between the sink and the lactation space and the employee's workstation when considering how to plan for flexible scheduling arrangements. The fifth standard for designation is to provide access to a hygienic place to store express breast milk. Options can include the employee's own personal cooler with an ice pack, an employer-provided personal cooler, a dedicated milk storage refrigerator, or simply a shared refrigerator space such as is in a break room. Some employers have questions about special precautions needed related to storing breast milk at the work site, and basically the requirements to provide access to hygienic storage alternatives really are intended to address the fact that not all work sites may be conducive to having a climate controlled area, or they might have biohazards around. So if that is the case in your setting, then it's the employer's responsibility to provide some place that's climate controlled, free from toxins or other hazardous exposures, for the employee to be able to provide, to store their breast milk safely, and even in their own cooler. Conditions that allow for hygienic storage of breast milk are similar to conditions needed for hygienic storage of other foods, such as the employee's lunch, for example. Breast milk is classified as a food, not as a body fluid, by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, and the Department of Labor's Occupational Safety and Health Administration does not include breast milk as a potentially infectious material. So OSHA says breast milk's okay in the workplace. I'm going to skip over that. So there's additional things that employers can do for additional recognition through the silver level or gold level designation. These are optional, but if your worksite is doing these things, then you might as well be recognized for them, and some of them are very easy to meet. So in order to be designated at the silver level, the minimum standards for mother-friendly must be met. Currently, under the current rules, a dedicated lactation room must be provided to be considered for silver level designation, and the employer must provide either a multi-user breast pump or provide each employee with a breast pump, a refrigerator or a cooler for the use of the employee, and or a sink in the lactation space. And then their policy must have additional flexible scheduling options or provisions for keeping the baby close during the workday, such as what I've talked about earlier. Like this can include a paid maternity leave policy or parental leave policy, having paid break time, having baby at work policies, on-site child care, work from home options, and other options similar to that. And then they must have a program that provides educational resources. And there are many freely available educational resources that can be used on your intranet, for example, such as posting the breastmilkcounts.com website, that's the Department of State Health Services breastfeeding resource, or materials that you can obtain from the Department of State Health Services. For gold level designation, minimum standards must be met, and a dedicated lactation room must be provided, and the room must provide a multi-user pump, the refrigerator or cooler, and a sink, a bulletin board, and a phone, so that the employee can continue to work while using the pump space. The written policy must support a gradual return to work, such as paid parental leave and or paid break time and or provisions for keeping baby close during the workday. And then also provide educational and referral resources, and more of those than are required under the silver level. So for employers that are implementing a mother-friendly policy, there's some best practices to keep in mind. None of this is required, as I said earlier. The requirements for being designated as a mother-friendly worksite program are simply that you have a written policy that address the minimum standards, and that you submit that policy to the department for review and approval. In order for you to effectively implement the program, it's recommended that you take these steps. So before developing the policy, seeking executive level support for implementing a comprehensive program of breastfeeding support. Gathering together a task force that includes folks from across your setting, including people that have experience with policy development, your facilities manager, having employees that might use the program or that have had experience with returning to work after having a baby, having management on the team, having your communications folks. All of those are potential members to engage in developing the policy. It's recommended that you conduct a worksite needs assessment to see what's currently being provided and then where the gaps are. And there are tools available at texasmotherfriendly.org to help you with each of these steps. After you've gotten a sense of what's happening in your worksite and what the needs are, weighing those needs against the potential options to provide for your employees, the resources that are available to you, and then the constraints within your work setting to develop a program plan that is going to meet the needs of both the employer and the employee. And then develop and implement those components to create a supportive environment. Once you've implemented the program, it's important to track how it's going. Are people using the program that you've put in place, and is it working for them? And then use that information to make improvements to your program as you go along. So a policy is one piece of a supportive environment. Other components include having facilities that are welcoming to your employees, having your managers and executives on board through training, support, and modeling of the program, talking about the program to employees, and even using the program themselves if they fit the bill, and then promoting and publicizing the program on an ongoing basis, and then having your employees that are using the program engaging them in promoting the program with other employees. Some basics of policy development. A policy is needed when the actions of employees indicate confusion about the most appropriate way to behave. Guidance is needed about the most suitable way to handle various situations. If a policy will protect the business legally, and in this case that might be indicated. If having a policy will assure compliance with government policies and laws. When policy would establish consistent work standards, rules, and regulations. And when policy would help in providing consistent and fair treatment to all employees. A policy is simply a set of rules that govern the implementation of processes in the workplace. A policy is different than procedures, which, different from a policy, are the guidelines for how implementation of the policy should be carried out. Any exceptions to the rule should be addressed in procedures rather than in policy. So, for example, folks have concerns about if an employee is abusing the policy, what will be done. That's best addressed in procedures rather than in a policy. The steps of policy and development include clearly articulating the goal you hope to accomplish with the policy. And this is where an assessment of your worksite and with your employees will help you to be able to clearly define your goal. Next, gathering information from all of the different sources that would be informative, including looking at legal requirements, best practices, sample policies, getting consultation from your legal and your human resource folks, and then develop and write the policy. Once the policy is drafted, it's a good idea to have many folks from a variety of perspectives review the policy to see if there are any things that you hadn't considered yourself that might come up about the way the policy is interpreted, how the policy might conflict with other existing policies, etc. And that's where your task force or committee might come in handy. It's important, of course, to gain management support for the policy, both in terms of approval, but also buy-in and ownership of the policy. And then ensuring that the policy meets all legal requirements. Once the policy is close to has been finalized, then it's important to communicate and implement the policy, and that you have a plan for communicating the policy on an ongoing basis so that it's not just a written document, it's a living policy that everybody knows about and everybody's following. And that you have a way or a mechanism in place to provide assurance for the policy. So a person or a group or an area in your organization that is responsible for overseeing that policy and will ensure that it's consistently and fairly implemented. And then periodically reviewing it to make sure that it's still relevant to your setting. A good policy is written in clear, concise, and simple language. It addresses the rule rather than in how to implement the rule. It's readily available with clear authority, so everybody should be able to access it and everybody should understand how it applies to them when they're going about their business as an employee at your setting. There should be somebody that an employee can contact if they need assistance with interpreting or enforcing the policy, and it should not conflict with other policies. A good procedure is tied to a policy, and it's consistent with that policy's goals and program plan. It's developed with the customer use in mind, providing benefits to the person who will use it. So it helps them know how to achieve their goals in implementing the policy. There should be a sense of ownership among the people who are going to be using the procedure. So that's where input from all of the different types of employees that might be affected by the procedure comes in handy. It should be understandable, clear, and concise, and should offer options for a variety of settings instead of being very strict or prescriptive. Restrictive procedures have limited usefulness and often are not followed. So for Mother-Friendly Worksite policy, a typical policy defines the purpose of the policy and states the organization's support for breastfeeding. It describes in general terms the provisions of time, space, the clean water source and sink, hygienic storage alternatives, and any other provided program components. So those four that I just mentioned are the minimum standards. And then if there are other additional program components, they could be addressed here in policy as well. A policy may include the manager and employee responsibilities for implementing the policy, and then it might refer to other policies, such as if you already have a flex time policy in place, rather than rewriting the flex time policy here, you can just point to your other policy. Often the policy will start with a statement of purpose. It will address an atmosphere of tolerance or of support. It will address how employees will be notified, and then it will address the criteria, the standards. A sample basic policy that would meet the criteria for mother-friendly designation is provided here. And it starts with a purpose and statement of support. It says, in recognition of the well-documented health advantages of breastfeeding for infants and mothers, that organization provides a supportive environment to enable breastfeeding employees to express their milk during work hours, and subscribes to the following policy. And then the policy is listed. This sample policy states that an employee is entitled to a reasonable amount of break time at appropriate intervals to express breast milk. The organization shall provide a room or other location in reasonable proximity to the employee's work area with an accessible electrical outlet and a locking door or other appropriate efforts to protect against intrusion, where the employee can express breast milk in private. The employee is entitled to use the sink, microwave oven, refrigerator, and freezer in any break area to clean breast pump equipment, wash hands, and store labeled breast milk containers in a hygienic manner. An employee shall notify her division director or immediate supervisor of her intent to use break time under this subsection. Breastfeeding employees are allowed to express breast milk during work hours. For additional time above and beyond that provided through normal break and or lunch times, employees may make up the time as negotiated with their supervisor. So this is a real Mother-Friendly Worksites policy. As you can see, it's pretty general, but it covers all of the required standards, including space, flexible scheduling, access to clean water source, and to storage in a general way. There are tools available for you, including more sample policies at texasmotherfriendly.org. If you go to the Build Your Program tab on that website, there is a step 4, which is develop your policy, and there is a policy guidance document that you can download that includes the basic criteria and then sample policies from a variety of work settings, and these are real designated mother-friendly work sites. So there's, I think maybe, there's 8 to 12 policies there from a variety of settings that you can look at. And we can include this along with the webinar at the link that will be sent to you. We also have, under Step 6, Implement Your Plan, some guides that have detailed information about how to provide space in a variety of settings, and also some tools to help you consider how to provide flexible scheduling and other opportunities to support employees with meeting their breastfeeding goals. You can also apply for the Mother-Friendly Worksite designation online, and it's a very simple process. You just need to have your policy close by and be prepared to answer a few questions about your policy that address the minimum standards and also how the policy will be communicated to your employees, and then have your worksite information ready. Your worksite, the application has to be submitted for each worksite, but the policy only has to be submitted once. You can, if you're entering multiple worksites, under the same policy, the form will pre-populate with the policy and other information that you provided in the first application, and you'll just need to put in information that's specific to the new worksites as you enter those applications. If you need any help at all with your application process, or if you have over 20 worksites and you'd like some help with entering those, you can contact us at info@texasmotherfriendly.org, and we can support you in entering those. So I'm going to stop talking and look at any questions that we've received.
All right, we're going to have Dr. Berg-Williams will help moderate here a little bit, and we invite anyone to type in their questions into the questions box. Obviously, a lot more people are now doing that, but we have one we can start off with. Dr. Berg-Williams.
Great, thanks. Carolyn Nevins asks, can the space for milk expression be a bathroom, but also have a shower stall and lockers, etc.? So not just a bathroom, but for other uses for employees only.
So the U.S. Department of Labor provides a very good guidance on this, and the mother-friendly criteria are aligned with the federal requirements under the Fair Labor Standards Act. The federal law is specific that the space cannot be a bathroom. And the only, so they do say that if there is if there's a bathroom that has an anteroom or a room that is off of the bathroom but connected to the bathroom, then you could use that space, but it does have to have a separate wall between where the toilet stalls are and where the lactation space is. So there has to be a physical wall. A shower room is also not considered hygienic for the purpose of milk expression because of the moist environment. It increases the potential for infectious germs to grow there. So it really does need to be a separate space. Can be directly next to a bathroom but separated by a wall.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, we have one here from Paula Botsford, and I'll let you read it, Dr. Berg-Williams.
Thank you. As we coordinate with the municipality for policy development in the area of seeking executive level support, are employers notified by the state that worksites must have a policy for the Texas Government Code, Chapter 19?
619.
619. So the Department of State Health Services is not mentioned in Government Code 619. We are not charged with communicating that law to all of the public employers because it's part of Government Code. Their governing bodies, whether that's their associations or their the city, any organization that cities get information from should be up on what the legal requirements are. Whether that's trickling down to the individual employers, such as a public health department, for example, or a school district, probably varies across the state. There's not a provision in the law that requires that any entity communicate the law with those employers. So they may or may not know about it. I hope that they do. It was effective September 1, so they really are supposed to already have policies in place. It was effective without a whole lot of lead time. You can use information that is available at texasmotherfriendly.org to promote the mother-friendly designation, and we can also provide a link to the legislation so that you can share that with employers if they're not familiar with the law.
Okay, great. I believe that those are our questions.
Okay, well, thanks everyone for participating today. We had a great webinar. Really enjoyed having you here. There's contact information on the screen here if you'd like to ask further questions, and texasmotherfriendly.org is a great place to get those resources again. Like I mentioned at the beginning, we recorded this webinar, and we will provide the link to the archive as well as some of those additional documents that were mentioned up on the webinar archive webpage on our website. So until then, thank you all so much for attending, and we look forward to seeing you at the next webinar.